Now, I can go with the plan that I thought 2 years ago. Ryuk asks, what plan? And Minoru says, I'm going to sell the Death Note. Hisashiburi. Dana. Beautiful. I am assuming that you have watched Deathnote. That's why you clicked on this video. And as you have clicked on this video, you should be knowing that Deathnote doesn't have any second season. But what if I tell you that there is a one-shot manga and it's official? Actually, in this manga, we see what happened in the Deathnote world after Kira's death. So let's begin with the manga named Kira. In the starting, we see the year 2013 and Ryuk sitting next to another Shinigami. The Shinigami says, do you want the notebook back? Ryuk says, I will take it, but I want an apple, as always. And after eating the apple and taking the notebook back, Ryuk goes in the human world to find the successor of the note, someone capable like Light, and also to eat apples. In the next page, we see the year May 2019, and we see a person sitting on his bed and listening music. Actually, it's our story's main character, Minoru Tanaka. But suddenly, we see Ryuk's hand coming out from the floor. Ryuk starts to approach him in a creepy way, and after coming close to him, Ryuk touches the Death Note to his head. Minoru gets some flashbacks and says, it's been 2 years, Ryuk. Now we see a 2-year-old flashback, and we see a scene of a faculty room. Some teachers are saying, Minoru Tanaka, top score once again. Another teacher says, very impressive, 3 years running. Another teacher says, he could be the smartest middle school student in all of Japan. But there is a catch. He is getting good scores in IQ test, but not in his English exam. He has gotten only 28 marks. Suddenly, a notebook drops on his head, and it's obviously the Death Note. Now Minoru has already made contact with the notebook. So when he turns around, he sees Ryuk standing behind him, which makes him freak out. Then Ryuk approaches him in a creepy way and says, I heard you're pretty smart, which makes Minoru confused. Then Minoru says, no, I don't even get marks in the tests. Then Ryuk says, but your teachers at school said you got first place 3 years running. Then Minoru says, yeah, but only in the intelligence test. Then he adds up, I have watched a lot of shows about IQ diagnostic and brain age, and also played a lot of IQ games. But it is all a waste, because the people who are actually smart are solving problems that pertain to the future. After hearing all this, Ryuk says, so are you an idiot? Minoru says, no, but I'm good at riddles and quizzes. Then Ryuk says, maybe someone like that is exactly suited for this. Minoru asks, suited? For what? And what are you anyway? You're really freaky. Then Ryuk says, we shouldn't just stand around talking though. Let's go to your house. Next, we see the scene of Minoru's house, where he says, what? This is Kira's Death Note. Ryuk says, be quiet. People can't hear me, but they can hear you. Then Minoru says, you mean the Kira? The Kira who eliminated war and greatly reduced crime rates? Ryuk says, for being so young, you seem to know a lot about him. Then Minoru says, everyone knows about him. He was in my textbook in elementary school. Then Ryuk asks, wow, really? They treat him like one of the greats, huh? Then Minoru says, no, we were taught that Kira was evil, and in the history books, he was described as a massive murdering terrorist, the worst in recent history. But there are a lot of people who say Kira was God. Then Minoru asks, how does a notebook like this make you a God? In reply, Ryuk says, the instructions are on the first page, just read them. But Minoru says, they are in English, and I don't know English. Can you translate it? Ryuk says, seriously? Then we are told about the rules of the Death Note. First rule, the human whose name is written in the notebook will die. Second rule, the notebook will not take effect unless the writer has the face of the person in their mind. Therefore, people having the same name will not be affected. Third rule, if the cause of death is written within 40 seconds of writing the person's name, it will happen. Fourth rule, if the cause of death is not written, then the person will simply die with a heart attack. Fifth rule, after writing the cause of death, details of the death should be written in the next 6 minutes and 40 seconds. Reading all this, Minoru understands that it is the real Death Note which Kira used. Then, Minoru asks more about Kira, but Ryuk says, I will have an apple first. Minoru says, you are lucky because my mom is on an apple diet, and I always have one every day. After eating the apple, Ryuk says, I will not tell about the personal details, but I will tell about the things I remember. Then, Ryuk tells about the things Kira did, and also how actually Kira made use of the rules about the Death Note possession. Minoru says, he must have been really smart. Ryuk says, yeah, his test scores were #1 in the nation. Then Minoru says, if you try to use the notebook the same as Kira used it, you will get caught, because it was 10 years ago, in a different era. Now there are security cameras on every street. Cars and buses have dash cams. If Kira tries to get his message out online, police can track him. If he talks through a phone, police can also track it. It means I can't use the Death Note the same as Kira did. but I'm sure Kira would have come up with a way to use it in this era. Now Ryuk asks, "Can you do that, Minoru?" Minoru in his mind says, "This Shinigami wants me to use the Death Note the same as Kira, but he doesn't want to use it." But if he returns the notebook, his ownership and memories will be gone, and also Ryuk can give it to someone else. Minoru thinks for hours, after which Ryuk says, "You haven't said for hours." Hearing that, Minoru says, "I'm the kind of person who thinks and thinks until he reaches his own answer." And then he asks two questions. First, "Are there other humans besides me who can see you?" Ryuk says, "Yes, I should be visible to the people who touch the notebook." Minoru says, "Are you sure?" Ryuk says, "I think so, because the people who possess the Death Note but lost the possession will not be able to see me, but those who have just touched the notebook will be able to see me." Then Minoru asks, "The human owner of a Death Note must be possessed by a Shinigami. How far can you actually get from the owner?" Ryuk says, "There is no firm rule about this, but I guess it works as long as I know where you are." Minoru demands a number. Ryuk says, "By the measurements of the human world, 14 kilometers, I guess." Then Minoru says, "I have decided I'm going to return the Death Note now, but come back in 2 years and give me the notebook back." He also promises to give Ryuk apples daily, but Ryuk doesn't care about the Death Note. He says, "So I will not be able to get apples for 2 years." Minoru says, "If you can't wait for 2 years, give the Death Note to someone else." Ryuk says, "Fine, I'll wait." Now we see the present day scene, where Minoru says, "That's how it went." Then he adds up, "Now I can go with the plan that I thought 2 years ago." Ryuk asks, "What plan?" And Minoru says, "I'm going to sell the Death Note." Ryuk gets shocked after hearing that, but Minoru says, "I'm going to put it in an auction house." Ryuk says, "That sounds fun, but didn't you say that everything on the internet could be tracked?" Minoru says, "Yes, but I'm not going to use the internet, I'm going to use TV. That's why I asked you how far you could be from me." Then Minoru adds up, "It was 14 kilometers, you said. Well, the Sakura TV is 11 kilometers from here, and you are going to convey my message from there." Now we see the scene of Sakura TV, where news reporting is going on, but suddenly a paper comes out of thin air in front of the camera, in which it was written, "The power to remotely kill people, as used by Kira, is being put up for auction. If you want to buy it, use the hashtag power of Kira on Twitter and indicate your bid amount in American dollars." Everyone in the room was confused. One person asks, "What is that?" Now we see that those who are watching Sakura TV are saying, "Kira's power is getting sold." Also, the management team is trying to figure out what is going on, and we see that Minoru is watching all of this on his phone. Now, we see a detective who is watching this news and sees Ryuk because he must have touched the Death Note. That's why he is able to see him. Then he runs and tells all of this to his deputy commissioner. Ryuk is trying to sell the Death Note. Then we see Ryuk is slowly disappearing because he was told to stand there for only 30 seconds. Now we see the scene of the next day, where some students are talking about Kira's power getting sold. Then, a person entraps them and says, "It hasn't even been a day, and people are already bidding $3 million online." Then another person says, "It's over 300 million yen in Japanese currency." Then Minoru, in his mind, says, "If it's Kira's power, millions of dollars is a cheap price." Now we see two detectives who are here to meet L. No, not this one. This one. Now I'm not going to say his name, because the AI voice will not pronounce it properly. They ask, "What's that?" L says, "It's a replica of a Shinigami. I'm trying to create a facial recognition system for Shinigami." After which he says, "Let's call the person who's putting the Death Note to auction, Akira." Then a detective asks, "Is it true or not?" L says, "It's true, I could see the Shinigami." Then he adds up, sending the Shinigami to the TV station instead of using the internet. Akira is being very cautious. Following the Shinigami will be the key to finding Akira. Then he says, "What we really need is security footage of Akira and the Shinigami together, especially if the murder notebook is being handed over. However, it's basically impossible to find that footage from all the cameras in Japan, unless we use people who can see Shinigami." Then the other detective asks, "So you think Akira is in Japan?" L says, "Based on the past Kira incident, we can assume a Shinigami can't be far from the notebook's owner. So it's safe to assume both Akira and the Shinigami are in Japan for now." Then the other detective says, "I'll arrange a ticket to Japan right away. We have to catch this guy." L says, "Catch?" assuming we even find Akira, are you sure you can charge them with a crime? Then he adds up, I would assume that killing someone with the notebook is a crime, but it doesn't seem like selling one would be. If you want to seize the notebook, find the person who will win the auction. Then a detective asks, why are you trying to track him? L says, because I have a personal interest in this. I would like to meet him. Now we see the camera footage of Sakura TV, in which Ryuk entered from the ground, then exited from the ground. Which means if the Shinigami is traveling between the TV station and Akira underground, then there's nothing we can do about it. Then L says, if Akira gives the ownership to the buyer, his memories will be gone, so we can't catch him. Even Akira will forget that he was Akira. It's a well-constructed plan. Then a detective asks, so we can't catch him? L says, there is a way. When the auction ends, a big amount of money will be transferred to a bank account, so we can track that and catch him. But if this fails, there is no other way to catch him. Now we see Minoru sitting on the bed saying, the bid has nearly reached 10 million yen. Ryuk asks, when are you going to end the auction and will I stop getting apples? Minoru says, I don't know, and I can give you apples for a bit long. Then Minoru uses Ryuk to put up another notice in Sakura TV in which it was written, 1 week left until the end of the auction. It may end prematurely as well. You will be informed if that happens. This transaction will be final. No complaints, no returns. Now we see that in the middle of this, a detective who can see Ryuk interferes saying, police! Don't even think of buying the power of Kira. Ryuk says it's been a while. A report says, aren't you the guy who appeared on our show and claimed to know who Kira is? He says, yes, that's right. By the way, his name is Matsuda. Now all of this confirms that the power which is being sold is the real Kira's power. Now we see a scene of the next day in which some students are saying, after the Tomorrow incident, the bid is up to $200 billion. That's 20 trillion yen. Another student says, it must be a group or a nation that is bidding. Then the bid rises again, and it went up to $300 million. Now Minoru uses Ryuk to put up another notice in which it's written, don't bother with Twitter. Put your government reps into the media to make an official announcement of how much you will pay to buy it. And imagine who would have bid first. It's none other than Donald Trump. And he says he will buy Kira's power for $500 billion. Then the president of China says he will buy it for $1 trillion. Then again, Trump says he will buy it for $2 trillion. Now, the next day, Minoru puts a notice saying, any world leader bidding must name a price only, no other nonsense. Now the next day, Trump bid 1 quadrillion yen. Everyone is shocked after seeing this. Minoru says, I will end the auction tomorrow, and once the payment is confirmed, I will discard the ownership of the Deathnote, and I want you to give it to the buyer. Now the detectives who were with L ask, how will Akira actually receive such a big payment? L replies, it's impossible to pay or receive that amount in bills. It has to be an online transaction. Now in his mind he says, even with an anonymous account, attempting to withdraw, it would leave a trail. Well, Akira, how are you intending to get the money? Now we see a scene of Minoru's house in which Minoru is sleeping, and we see another Shinigami entering his house. Ryuk says, what are you doing here? He says, the Shinigami King is calling. You have to go back as soon as you're able to leave the side of your human. Now, the next day, we see that Minoru has confirmed that Kira's power has been sold to USA for this amount, and the payment method will be revealed in 24 hours. Now everyone is talking. USA will be getting the Deathnote, but L is still thinking, how is Akira going to handle such a big transaction? Then he adds up. Akira will tell after 24 hours, that would be 6 p.m. on Friday, May 24th, in Japan time. And on Friday, the banks get closed at 3, and they don't open until the weekend. But it's a quadrillion yen. He will get caught easily. But what Minoru announces will shock you. He says, the money from the winning bid should be deposited by May 27 of this year, in equal amounts to every person with a Yotsuba Bank of Japan, savings account and registered residence in Tokyo, aged 60 and under, as of the date of May 24, 2019. Which means every person will get 1 billion yen. Hearing this, Minoru's mom comes and says, you have a savings account in Yotsuba Bank, don't you? Minoru says, yes, that means he will get 1 billion yen as well. Now we see L, and he is saying, limiting the age does increase Akira's share, but it also narrows down the possible targets. Another detective says, even still, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people with those accounts. Then L says, and once 3 days have passed, even Akira will not remember ever being Akira. It's basically impossible for us to find Akira at this point. Then he says, for the first time since becoming L, I must admit defeat, which means our Akira has defeated L. Now we see that the 1 quadrillion yen has been transferred to the bank, but to divide it equally, it will take some time. So everyone's account has been freezed for a month. Now Minoru says, the payment has been made, so it's time to transfer the ownership to USA. Ryuk asks, is that everything then? Minoru says, yep, and once I have discarded the ownership of the Deathnote, don't ever show up again. Ryuk says, I didn't realize you hated me this much. And Minoru gives back the Deathnote ownership. Next, we see the scene of the White House, where Ryuk is giving the Deathnote to Trump. Trump touches the notebook and he sees Ryuk. Then Ryuk says, I was yelled at by the Shinigami King before I came here. He said, how could you let him sell the Deathnote in the human world? So there is another rule added, and that is, the human who buys or sells the Deathnote in the human world will die. The seller will die when they receive the money, and the buyer will die when they receive the Deathnote. Hearing all this, Trump says, that's crazy! Ryuk says, so you paid for your own death. Then he adds up, if you refuse to take the notebook, I'll treat it as if you didn't buy it. But at this point, you aren't getting any of your money back. Now, if you take the notebook, you'll die, but it will remain here. So someone high and mighty in this country will get it, right? You'll die, but it'll belong to your nation. But Trump refuses to take it and says, I will pretend that I have the power of Kira. After hearing all of this, Ryuk says, what do I do now? Minoru doesn't know about the new rule, and he said not to ever show up again. Now we see a scene of 1 month later where everyone can access their money. And at this point, Minoru dies. We see that Ryuk has written his name in the Deathnote under Light Yagami. He says, what a shame. His plan was perfect. I guess it doesn't matter how you do it. Any human who uses the Deathnote meets an unfortunate end. But Ryuk doesn't give a shit. While thinking about apples, he says, isn't there anyone who will use this thing for a bit longer than that? And with that, this manga ends. And so does this video. By the way, if you want more of this type of content, consider subscribing.